Hi everyone, the King of Comedy here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review, a classic review of Portishead's Dummy. This is the debut full-length album of UK trip-hop outfit Portishead, dropped originally in 1994 and is seen as one of the three major breakout records that helped define the genre around this time. This record, Tricky's debut record, and Massive Attack's Blue Lines. Now, trip-hop, which has shared quite a bit of common ground over the years with downtempo, is one of the many corners of 90s music culture that felt like a melting pot of both underground and mainstream music styles that were prevalent at the time. With so many strains of rock, pop, hip-hop, electronic music, soul, and R&B coalescing into the public's collective music consciousness at the time, it only makes sense that you would have a new breed of artists that are trying to thread most, if not all of it together. And that's especially true of Portishead, who on this record seemed to perfectly balance hip-hop grooves, chill electronics, and cinematic instrumentation in a way that maximized their commercial potential and also emotional impact. While Dummy isn't packed with snappy dance pop anthems or anything, there is something instantly appealing about the melancholy beauty and evocative soundplay the record does deliver. And I think that's shown in the massive amount of influence this record has had on popular music at large. Whether you're talking about the countless number of times this album and Portishead in general have been sampled, whether that be by Vince Staples, 3-6 Mafia, R&B legend Aaliyah, and also modern punk rap rebels Horror. And there's also just the general constructs and ideas that Portishead show off in their music that have been very blatantly copied by some pretty major stars, both old and new, be that Kanye West, FKA Twigs, even Gorillaz. As for the actual listening experience of this record, it's essentially 49 straight minutes of sad, eerie slappers, backed with beautiful, head-nodding, otherworldly beats, and topped with Beth Gibbons' beckoning, heart-wrenching lead vocals. The intro track on this record is not only one of the best songs here, but a great presentation of what is essentially to come. Hypnotic breakbeats with some fat kicks, a little snare roll, which are paired with guitars and keys that would be appropriate for the theme of a Bond film set in an alternate dimension. Then as the track progresses, it sounds like we get a bit of theremin? Overall, the sound of this track is so chunky, gorgeous, and textured, especially as the group transitions out of this very simple, intense two-chord progression. Did you really want? Oddly enough, those Bond theme vibes seem to intensify on the following track, Sour Times, where some fluttering hammered dulcimer and weary strings play out a forlorn chord progression against some very tangy surf guitar, which is just shuddering with tremolo. Plus the picked bass with the hollow tone. Nice touch. Then, of course, Gibbons gives this absolutely emotionally devastating vocal performance. I guess you could call the track a love song, but if that's the case, this is easily one of the most uncanny love songs ever written. Rhythmically, the following track, Stranger, starts working in some boom bap type timbres. The heavy skipping beat on this one sounds almost like I'm listening to a loop of a rhythm off a vinyl record that's just stuck on one part and going over and over and over. Plus, on top of that, the distorted guitar bits, the jazzy samples, just the overall groove of the thing. Like, if you took just the instrumental here, you could easily throw some rugged and wild, like Brooklyn 90s MCs on this thing to start screaming their brains out. I also see the beat on this thing to be a bit of a precursor to some Gorillaz production too, as while it is pretty hard and aggressive, there is something sort of, I guess, cartoony and sinister about the sound play on the track as well. Strangely enough, Gibbons vocally seems to be riffing in such a way as if her voice was being lifted from another source somewhere and then looped onto the record. I mean, I know she's not being chopped to bits as far as her performance goes, but again, just the way that she's phrasing and repeating certain lines. Sometimes the magic of this record lies not just in the performances or in the quality sounds, but also in how they are assembled and put together. Then It Could Be Sweet leads us to another stellar vocal performance on the production end of things. We have a lot of minimal pulsing pulsating electronic beats, not nearly as much texture or volume as on other tracks, and frankly I think the song is better for it, as this just intensifies the feelings of longing and loss and temptation that are delivered in the lyrics. Next, Wandering Star, which features some of my favorite vocal passages on the entire record, is one of the few songs here that I find to be oddly scary. There is this incredibly murderous 3-chord progression that really puts me on the edge of my seat. It's also hilarious to me that maybe the most chilling song on the record is just loaded with the samples of a song featuring Eric Burdon and War, which is just absolutely funky. But despite how far and away the tone of the original track is, somehow in context here it only adds to the very chilly and strange vibe of the song. Also, the way the DJ scratches throughout the track play out this funny little chromatic guitar line, which feels almost like a precursor to the hip-hop influence stuff that Tom Waits would do on his Real Gone record years and years later. Once again, it's another fire track on this record that brings together so many sounds and styles and vibes in a seamless and moody way. The following It's a Fire takes on a very different tone though. The combination of shining organ chords and Gibbons' soulful lead vocals leave this track feeling like a religious experience. Also, once the beat drops, this track essentially feels like a precursor to the countless hits that would come after, featuring female singer-songwriters singing sad little ditties over laid-back, head-nodding hip-hop beats. As we begin to close in on the end of the LP, we get the song Numb, which I don't find to be one of the strongest songs here from a writing standpoint, but at the very least, Gibbons' vocals and the thin, sour organs that play throughout much of the track do give it a surreal down-tempo vibe. Roads is yet another moment on the LP where the group sounds almost like they're trying to write these sad, slow power anthems for a soundtrack that doesn't exist. And speaking of being ahead of the curve, one of the most detailed tracks here, Pedestal, the chill beats, the smooth bass line, the atmospheric DJ scratches and horn breaks, the vocals that are laid out with dreamy effects, and the psychedelic sound play here and there, it's hard to believe this track precedes DJ Shadow's introducing by a few years, because this track is somehow bolder and more experimental than a good chunk of the material on that classic instrumental hip-hop record. Biscuit features some electric piano loops and dubby horns that I love quite a bit, but maybe the most stunning aspect of its production and structure is this short vocal sample from Johnny Ray's I'll Never Fall in Love Again, which is pitched down and presented as if it's a voice calling from the abyss and fading to black like it's a distant memory. And as strange as it sounds, it is a bit of an oasis in the middle of these very tense verses on the record. I think Gibbons gives maybe her most pained vocal performance on the entire LP here on this very track. The song essentially sounds like the soundtrack to being trapped, lost, forsaken. Then Glory Box, which I found to be yet another strong moment on the record, a cinematic and bold, lush finisher, brings together elements of soul, also what I see as classic psychedelic rock, soundtrack music too. You know, after you go through this entire LP, there are so many aspects of Portishead's sound that are really simple, really to the point. You could even make an argument that maybe by the end of this LP, the group is starting to paint themselves into a corner a little bit. But I think that simplicity that's presented here is a little deceptive as well, because the quality vocal performances, the solid ideas and songwriting foundations that these tracks are based on, as well as the creative sound play, allows Portishead to do a lot with a little. One of the best things about this record, which I also find to be something that rings true of some of the best records from the artists they've influenced over the years, is that every sound and every element going into all of these tracks is fantastic. They make sure every sound counts and has a vibrant personality, which means they don't really need to pack a lot of these tracks with too much to get a groove, make a statement, make a fulfilling song, and that leads to tracks that are colorful, that are gratifying, that are emotionally engaging, but also really spacious too. But yeah, Dummy, from front to back, excellent record, fantastic record, highly recommend it, classic record. Give it a listen, spend some time with it if you haven't already, and maybe even if you have. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Portishead, forever.